Warm welcome to everyone from Shanghai. My name is David Thian. I'm originally from Singapore, but I have relocated to Shanghai since the beginning of this year. Let me just spend a couple of moments to briefly introduce my background. I started my career in the Singapore Civil Service, spent spent 7 years in the civil service before I decided to further my own education, went abroad to Canada, did a business degree, came back to Singapore. And then when I came back, I have been to work in different roles in different industries, ranging from hospitality, pharmaceutical, logistics, and also in IT. And so during a couple of years, I was just looking for what I'm actually what I'm interested in. So finally, I landed myself in learning and development. So that was back about more than 14 years back. So I've been in a learning and development role for 14 years, 8 of which is in a leader development role in a multinational. So currently I'm with this organization called Johnson Controls Incorporated, a company based in the United States. We are a multi-industrial company dealing in automotive car seats, car batteries, and also air conditioner chillers for large buildings. So that's what my organization does. So my role is in leader development, and what I'm about to share with you is just some personal learnings that I have gained over the years, and also what some of the corporate organizations are doing in developing their leaders. To start off, I'll just share with you briefly the agenda. So I'm going to briefly define what leadership is all about based on some of the popular quotes from some prominent leaders, and also briefly mention about leadership approaches, how leadership was being studied, and then move on. Point number 3, talk about leadership development, how some organizations are developing their leaders. And also I'm going to talk about successful and effective leaders. What does that mean for you as a leader? I'm also going to use the whole brain thinking model to briefly share with you about what is important for you as a leader, what is important for you to look at, to develop, how you can go about developing yourself. And then finally, I'm going to end up with some personal reflections, something on my wish list that I would like leaders to, of qualities that the leaders do have. Alright, so jumping along, just quickly share with you what are some of the definitions of leadership. Alright, starting with the first one from Peter Drucker, who is known to be a management guru. Right, so the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. Well, from the definition itself, it doesn't seem to tell us a lot about leadership. But again, Peter Drucker is known to be a management expert. Now, to him, leadership is very simple. You need to have followers. Let's move on to the next definition. So, according to Warren Bennis, leadership is to translate vision into reality. So to Warren Bennis here, his definition is that the leader is a person who has a vision of what he wants to achieve for himself, for the organization that he is in, and then turning that vision into reality by mapping up a strategy and plans and turn to achieve that vision that he has in mind. The next one from Bill Gates, one of the big corporate leaders formerly from Microsoft. So according to Bill Gates, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. So from Bill Gates' perspective, leadership is about empowering people, giving people the authority, the responsibility, and allowing them a lot of free play to get a job done, to achieve the goals, to achieve the vision of the organization. And the next definition I have is that of from John Maxwell. So according to John, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So in a nutshell, leadership is just about influencing people, getting people to see your point of view, getting people to follow you. And the final one I have, the one that the most. So leadership, according to Ken Blanchard, the author of the 1 Minute Manager, and also one of the creators of the situational leadership model too. So according to Ken, again, he talks about leadership is an influence process, right? It is working with people to accomplish their goals and the goals of the organization. So I like Ken Blanchard's definition here, because it tells us a little bit more. Apart from leadership being an influence process, it talks about working with people to accomplish people's goals and also the goals of the organization. So in this respect, it is twofold. So leadership is not just about the leader having a vision for the organization and going all out to achieve that vision. It's also along the way helping people, the followers, the team members in the organization, the employees in the organization, and to achieve their own goals as well. So there's a dual purpose down here, right? So achieving the goals of the organization and also achieving the goals of the people who are working in the organization. From experience, I find that sometimes there are a lot of leaders who tend to forget that, hey, they're leaders, they have a vision, they want to go out to achieve the organization vision. There are certain times where they tend to forget that the people working with them also have their own personal goals and personal goals that and vision that they want to accomplish. So I think as a leader, we need to bear that in mind as well. Now, so that's some of the definitions on leadership. Now let's briefly touch on leadership approaches through the decades. So starting from the first one, the trait approach. So when leadership was first being studied, so a group of scientists, researchers, they came together and studied the traits of great leaders, and they're trying to identify what are the traits that great leaders have. And after doing a lot of study, the researchers themselves are not able to agree on which are the important traits that that leaders should have. Right, so that was the trait approach to leadership. Then comes along the behavior approach. So another group of people, it says that, hey, you know, the people who studied about leadership traits, they couldn't come to an agreement on their own. So no, let's take a different approach. Let's look at leadership behaviors as well. So what kind of behaviors that will make leaders successful? So they concluded that a leader who has a high concern for people and also a high concern for results tend to be very successful. So they kind of created different they kind of put a leadership on a grid to say that yes, some leaders have high concern for people, high concern for the results, while some other leaders, they may have a high concern for results, but not very high concern for the people that they lead. So they advocated that the best way is to have high concern for both results and people. Now that came along another group of researchers who advocated a different approach to leadership. They look at the situation, they look at what you call a situational or contingency approach to leadership. So two prominent people who stood out in this particular branch. So there's a gentleman by the name of Fred Fiedler. So he advocated that we need to match the right leader to the right situation. So in other words, in different organizations, different culture, different backgrounds, different industries, we need to find the leader with a certain set of skills that were matched to that particular organization. So that was what he advocated. And from another perspective, Ken Blanchard came up with a situational leadership model. So according to Ken, then he says that, hey, as a leader, the leader can actually adapt his leadership style according to the people that he works with and to the situation, to the organization that he is in. So he came up with a situational leadership model. And in that particular model, he says that, well, as a leader, we can take a directive approach to working with our people. We can start to give instructions, we can tell them what to do, and the job gets done. So the leader can also take what you call a coaching approach, getting people to share their ideas, and then the leader will guide and direct them, right? So that is another approach. The third approach will be more of the leader supporting them, empowering the people to do the job, while the leaders stand by the side to support them and to help them, guide them whenever the team members need help. And finally, the last approach will be that of delegating, where the leader or the manager simply delegate the job to the subordinates and then take a step back and allow the team member or the subordinate to get the job done. So that's another approach of looking. That's the situational approach that we are talking about. And finally, in today's context, in the integrated psychological approach, studies have shown they look at the situational, they look at all the other different approaches. They say that, hey, well, those other approaches, the trait approach, the behavior approach, the situational contingency approach, it does make a lot of sense. However, they are not able to kind of provide a unified theory to how we approach leadership. So what this integrated approach did was that they combined all the different approaches to studying leadership into one. So according to the one of the more popular integrated psychological approach is that from this gentleman by the names of James Scholar. He wrote a book called The 3 Levels of Leadership. So according to him, yes, situational leadership is good, but however, there are times when the leader may not every leader is able to adjust his or her own style to meet to the needs of the team member or meet to the needs of the situation or the organization. So what he suggests is that as a leader, we need to develop the leader from a psychological perspective. The leader needs to be able to understand himself or herself very well. What are his belief systems like? What are his own values? What are his pain points? What are his strengths and challenges, etc. So it's by allowing the leader to understand himself or herself better, then the leader is able to do a much better job in leading his team and the organization that he is in. So that's the psychological approach to leadership. Now let's move on to the next thing. So in a lot of organizations, in organizations that I've worked with, right, in terms of doing leadership development. So these are some of the things on the slide. You can see these are some of the topics that our leaders being trained in. And so we have development workshops for the leaders to help them to develop strategic thinking, in planning skills, how to collaborate with people, decision making, coaching, how to manage the performance of the team members, how to build effective teams, interpersonal skills, and also emotional intelligence. Now, so these are some of the common programs that the organizations tend to use to develop their leaders. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a model, the whole brain model, to you, and then I will share with you how it relates back to what I am talking about over here. Now, before we jump on to the whole brain model, Now again, in the words of Clem Blanchard, who created the situational leadership model, so according to him, he says that a leader needs a leader needs to be both successful and effective. So he differentiates what we mean by success. So according to him, the leader is able to perform very well in his role, achieve the results for his organization, also able to kind of shape the behavior of his people, his followers, to move in a way that he wants them to move. Right, so when a leader is able to achieve all that, it is deemed that the leader is successful. Now, on the other hand, when we talk about effectiveness, it says that when a leader is effective, it means that the leader is able to help his team members or his followers to develop great attitudes, to get a high commitment from his people, and also to have his people feeling good working for him. Now, there are some leaders who are very successful in what they do. However, they may not be very effective. On the other hand, there could also be some leaders who are very effective with their people. However, they may not be very successful. And of course, we know that in a corporate world, leaders who are not successful may not last very long on the job. So the whole idea down here is to learn how to balance the results and the people aspect of leadership. Right, so that's why Ken Blanchard was talking about we want to be able to create both successful leaders who are able to deliver the results and effective leaders as well who are able to influence his people or influence the people and to get his people to feel good and motivated working together as a team. Now, let's move on to talk about another model that I would like to share with you called the whole brain model. As many of you are aware, we have two parts of the brain, the left brain and the right brain. And I believe that the previous speaker has shared something on that when she talked about imagenetics. So very briefly, so we have the left brain is responsible for logic, for problem solving, for language skills, for analytical skills, for organizing, for planning. While the right brain is responsible more for a big picture, for creativity, for emotions, for interpersonal, more of interpersonal relationship. Now, based on this, couple of people, they developed what they call the whole brain model, the whole brain thinking. A couple of people includes people like Ned Herman, who created the Herman brain instrument. So we also have, of course, we have Gail Browning, who created Imagenetics, this organization that is organizing this seminar, and also another gentleman who created a similar tool. Now, what this whole brain tool is all about, if you look at the diagram on the left side, you have the blue quadrant and the green quadrant. So that represents the left brain, and of course on the yellow and red quadrant represents the right brain. So on the left hand, the blue quadrant is analytical, and then green we have structural. On the right hand side we have yellow, conceptual, and red we have social. So you'll realize that the left part of the brain deals with what I would describe as more hard skills, things like fact finding, things like logic, things like reasoning, things like analytical, planning, learning how to organize things, while the right brain kind of is responsible for the softer skills like interpersonal skills, having a vision, having a strategic plan or creative thinking. Now, what kind of leader would I like to have? Some thoughts about after being working in the leader development role for quite a long time. What kind of leader I would like to have? Ideally, the leader that I have is someone who is visionary, who is strategic, who is analytical, who is organized, and very importantly, have very good interpersonal skills, who's able to relate to his followers or his team members very well. So remember, at the end of the day, leadership is about people. It's about influencing the people that we work with. Yes, achieving organization results is important. Now, attending to the people, looking after the people, caring for the people, for the followers is equally important as well. So in short, we want to have both successful and effective leaders, and not just successful and ineffective leaders. So we want to learn how to strike a balance between the two. And so the whole brain model, if you look at it, right? So if we're able to achieve the skills that are on the skills on the left, the blue quadrant, the green quadrant that I showed you earlier on, and also learning to balance the yellow quadrant and the red quadrant, right? Having balanced our skill set in both areas, that will help us to be what you call a whole brain leader, a leader who is more balanced in a high concern for the results, and also a high concern for people at the same time. And the last slide that I have, right, in developing leaders, personally for me, I think what will help in developing leaders. So at the very top, I think as a senior leaders in an organization, they need to role model. They need to be role models for the other the levels of leaders in the organization to follow. Because a lot of times when I work with some of the middle level managers, they say that, hey, you asked me to do this, you asked me to coach my people, but my boss is not coaching me. So they don't see the need, because their leaders are not modeling what we are actually teaching them or training them in. So point number one, senior leaders, they need to role model in order for the other leaders in the organization to follow their lead. The second point, to use psychometric tools to help the leaders to understand themselves and to understand others well. So some of the psychometric tools that comes to mind, one of my favorite is the imagenetics. I find that it's a very simple tool, very powerful. It helps the managers to understand what their thinking preference is, and of course to learn how to make use of it and leverage their strength, and also to overcome the challenges based on the understanding of themselves. And also another tool that that is good for leaders to get to know themselves is that of MBTI. Another possible tool is getting them to take a EQ assessment. So there's this 360 EQ assessment that I came across, which is very good, something like a 360 report. So in this aspect, the participant will get feedback from all his peers, his manager, his subordinates on what they think about his level of emotional quotient is like. And finally, another tool that I do like a lot is that of the Enneagram. So the Enneagram talks about personality. It helps the person to really have an in-depth understanding of his inner psyche. So the third one, as mentioned, would be training leaders in emotional intelligence, getting them to be able to be aware of themselves, to be aware of the people that they are working with. So that will help them to manage the relationship with the team members or followers more effectively. And also, importantly, I think the senior leaders also got to mentor the junior leaders and continue to coach them on a continual basis, so that they are able to learn more and grow as they progress in their career. And finally, very importantly, I think we need to put some metrics in place to ensure that the leaders are actually developing their leaders, and the lower level leaders will in turn developing their team members who are working together with them. So to me, what gets measured gets done, and this has been my experience in organizations that I work with. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm going to pass the time back to Terence who's going to host the question and answer session. Back to you, Terence.
Thank you very much, David. And of course, you were listening to David Thian, who is speaking live from Shanghai in China. And David is the Senior Manager, Leader Development Asia from a company that's called Johnson Controls Inc. And of course, now we are opening the session for questions. So if you have any questions, please do type your question in the Q&A box, which is on the bottom right corner of your screen. And to keep the Q&A session going, I have a question for David. So David, thank you very much for painting a very broad picture and almost very structured as well in how you define leadership, or rather how different people define leadership, and then you spoke about the different approaches, and of course you also talk about your own personal wish list of traits that you like to see in leaders, as well as sharing a little bit more about leadership development. Now, you are in a very unique position because you are a Singaporean who is now based in China, and you are working for a company that is predominantly a US company. So that pretty much gives you a really nice view or an insight into people in Singapore, in China, and in the US. So, coming from a follower's perspective, because that's your topic, right? Leadership from reflections of a follower. Looking at leaders, do you have any observations? Could you share some observations that you may have of how different cultures look at leadership? From Singapore, from China, from US. Are there some observations that you could share in terms of how people in China perhaps are looking at leadership development at this point in time?
Sure, Terence. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share the two extremes, and Singapore is just somewhere in between. Starting with US, in US, I think leaders are more, what they call that, they tend to empower the people to do the job. They delegate, and they give a lot of leeway, a lot of allow a lot of room, or allow the people to take initiative, so people will get the job done on their own without the managers being very directive. This is the what I'm sharing is just a general trend. Of course, there are always exceptions. So that's the more of the US approach of leadership, and the Americans are used to that kind of leadership style. So that worked pretty well in the US. While in China it is a little bit different. While because of the China has just opened up for the last over 10 years or so, and as we know, China has a very different political system, a very different culture from the United States as well. So in China, the leaders generally tend to take a more directive approach, especially so in the local organizations. However, for the multinational, the local leaders in China, they too take a cue from the corporate leaders who are based in US, or who are based in Europe. So in this case, for Johnson Controls, of course, the senior leaders are all based in the US. So the local leaders take their cue from the leaders from the corporate office. So they also took on a more empowering approach to leading their people. Now, that is the approach that the local leaders are taking. However, on the other hand, there are still some employees who are very much used to the little bit more autocratic approach of the local organizations whom they have worked with previously before joining a multinational. So they still tend to take the cue, or prefer to take instructions from their managers or from their leaders, rather than taking their own initiative to get the job done. So even though some of the leaders they try to empower, but still there still be some of the local employees, they are learning to to take their own initiative, and they're doing good. They're doing a good job, using their own way, being creative as to get a job done. But there's still a group of people who will kind of take the cue from their leaders, right? And they will not move until the leaders say, yes, you need to do this, and then they will start moving. So Singapore is we are kind of right in between the American and the Chinese